Okay, welcome to the SumerSports Show. I'm Eric Eager. I'm doing the Friday episode solo today. I was joined last week by Tage Seth. I was joined a couple weeks ago by Matthew Collar, but today we're going solo. I'm actually where I grew up in the great town of Maplewood, Minnesota, which has been a lot of fun. The weather here has been relatively mild, especially considering how things have been across the country. My thoughts are out for people who are dealing with the air quality stuff that has been really tough around many places in the country. And by the way, I want to wish all of you a happy Independence Day for all those that are in the United States. We will not be doing a show Monday. We'll return Wednesday. Tage and Parker will have a guest that day. They had a fantastic guest on Wednesday. And Cody, he was terrific in terms of talking about coverages and what he sees and all of those things, and obviously bridging the gap between analytics and coaching, and as well as just traditional football analysis. Cody was one of the big Data Bowl finalists during this past round, so certainly a great analytical thinker as well as a great football mind. So we really liked having him on there. We're just going to review the week. We'll talk a little bit about the AFC South. It was just we're going to have a series of division previews on SumerSports.com. By the way, again, if you're here, of course, subscribe, rate, review, tell somebody about the show, subscribe to YouTube as well as one of the podcast platforms. We'd love for that to happen. But also go to SumerSports.com, sign up for the newsletter. We're going to start to have newsletters out really, really quickly. And, within the next month or so, we will have some updates to SumerSports.com that will be pretty cool. So I can't wait to give you guys the look into that. So, the week that has been pretty mild. I mean, Devontae Parker got a contract from New England, 3 years up to $33 million. It's not going to be quite that much, which kind of put him on par with Juju Smith-Schuster, who they acquired from Kansas City after he helped the Chiefs win a Super Bowl. Parker is a decent receiver at some things, especially contested stuff. Not a great separator. Kind of an interesting decision there. Seems like he would be a little bit redundant with a player that the New England Patriots have been rumored to want in DeAndre Hopkins. The market for Hopkins does not appear to have strengthened all that much, whereas we hear a lot of about Dalvin Cook. Some of the his offers that are on the table. People are coming into the chat here. Cameron Fletcher, hi Eric, hello, how's it going? We love having you guys here. I am going to take questions sort of at the end. The other thing, of course, that we've had this week is the Isaiah Rodgers suspension. Some other players. Petit Freer for the Tennessee Titans, getting the 6 games, and a lot of discussion by media members who really don't understand the gambling space at all. And I say that humbly as somebody who, early in my career, back when I was, part-time with PFF until kind of full-time with PFF, and now, the first ever sports betting wager I placed was in 2016, so not all that long ago. This idea that, sports betting, it's just a lot of people have come to the forefront to have opinions about this that have not really done any sort of research or really any sort of, thinking about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is, somebody like Clay Travis, he's been giving out sports betting picks on his website, for the better part of a half a decade. And to not know, and I know, sports betting has been legal in Tennessee, where I think his studio is and everything, but to not know that these sports betting apps, in the terms of service, they are tracking you so that they can determine whether you're in a legal state or not. That is a huge tell. That, for one, is telling me that this person's giving away gambling picks without having sort of has never really gambled in his life before, right? And not to say that you have to, like I did, when you were younger, travel from the state of Ohio to Indiana, go to like the parking lot of a Burger King to place bets and sort of finesse the geo tracker to actually have an opinion on sports betting. That's not what I'm saying. You have to have an opinion that's more of an adult opinion than that. And he certainly had one that was not. And then you had, of course, Mike Florio talking about Jonathan Jones's comments, where Jonathan Jones talked about how the league is increasing its betting footprint, and the players should be able to profit off it. And I think very naively, Mike Florio said that these players should be able to bet on their own money lines of their own teams or stuff like that. And there's obviously I think a lot of naivete there. I mean, and I went on a kind of a tweet rant about it last night, but you think about let's say Patrick Mahomes are going to bet on the Chiefs money line every single game, and he bets $1,000, $1,000, $1,000, and then one week he either decides not to bet or bets twice as much. That's a signal to the sports book that is different. That is different than even the betting in and of itself. And so I feel like again, it's just, you have to think about these things and the possible tentacles. And I'm disappointed in Mike just because he's a lawyer. He supposedly is a very smart guy, and he should be able to think through these things. And most of his opinions on sports betting thus far have been, I would say, like, childish and really naive. And frankly, ones that I think give players cover for doing something that, to me, like, if you're betting on your own team and your own sport, fairly unethical. We'll take some questions here. Mojal asks, how many players use friends and family to bet for them? I think it's more prolific than people think. I think I actually, my hot take is I don't think players are betting any more or less than they were before. I think before, we had sports betting, becoming ubiquitous after PASPA in 2018, like, where are all these players getting suspended? Indianapolis, that's in Indiana. Indiana's a legal betting state. Detroit, Michigan, that's a legal betting state. The Tennessee Titans, Tennessee is a legal betting state. Like, these guys are getting caught because the apps are, I think rightfully in bed with these leagues, and they have the information, right? And so it's actually doing something to clean, like, the leagues being in partnerships with these teams is actually going to end up cleaning up the league, because we're going to have information to the as to sort of what these players are doing. You're not seeing players, for example, getting suspended out of Minnesota because sports betting's not legal here. Cincinnati, Cleveland, you're not seeing that because sports betting was not legal in Ohio until relatively recently. So on and so forth. So no, I think teams have been players have been betting forever, and they've just been betting offshore, and they've just been betting illegally through places like betonline.ag or Bovada or something like that. Five Dimes, rest in peace, those kind of things. They've certainly been betting for a long time, and now they're just getting caught doing so. I think that it ends up being, the actual thorny issue ends up being, can they bet on other sports? Because again, team employees in the NFL, this isn't true about every sport, but team employees in the NFL, and even people that like work for NFL Network, like for example, like Cynthia can't bet on sports. So because there's information that they have as far as data on players. Let's say a player's a two-sport athlete in college, like they'll have information on that player's ability that maybe the public isn't privy to. Now, who knows if that's necessarily, if that's, the akin to insider trading or anything, but that's the line they want to draw. And so the reason that players can't bet on other sports at the facility is, of course, a coach could go up to a player and say, hey, let me put $200 on some player here, or some player prop or some bet, and the player could feel obliged to do it. And that of course makes the assumption that the players and coaches only interact in team facilities, but they're making rules like that. Like, I think that players being able to bet on other sports is fine. At the team facility is an interesting line to cross, but it's the line that is right now, and there's a reason for it. Aaron Salazar says players should definitely let their peeps bet for them. None of them should gamble at all. I I think that you're opening a huge can of worms if you allow the players to bet on their own sport. Like you could say, like, for example, DeAndre Hopkins. Like, what if DeAndre Hopkins has a futures bet on the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills? Like, is that going to influence who he ends up going and playing for? It very much might, and that's not really something you want to have going on in your sport. Even something to the effect of, let's say that you have a bet on the Indianapolis Colts to win the AFC South, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The Indianapolis Colts to win the AFC South, and you are playing let's say that you're in a game that doesn't even involve Indianapolis, but for example, your winning or losing could affect that bet indirectly. Like there are tentacles to get there, right? And so I just think because the degrees of separation of all of these bet types are, fairly limited. Like you could probably trace any one outcome in the NFL to a number of different things, and we did this for Steve Kornacki a long time ago. Like you're only separated from outcomes in the NFL by a game or two. And so to say, well, he's not betting on his own games, he's not, like, to me, it doesn't, you get too much into this idea that, well, actually, like you could have an incentive to play this way because it could have this effect on this bet that you made that had nothing to do with your team. And so I think that outlawing it, for players altogether is the right. Now that you can have a different opinion, and I think it's natural to sort of think about, oh, well, maybe players will bet on themselves and all that. A couple things that to me makes that not a great argument is A, the players are already betting on themselves, and B, the players are getting the spoils of gaming, right? Like in the CBA, they get, the sponsorship money that comes in from these sports books. Now they don't get much as the owners, and the owners in many cases are owning some parts of these things. But that inequality is always going to exist for no matter what. Same thing with like merchandise and all that kind of stuff. Like many of these owners have their hands in those too. But they are getting, that is revenue that comes in the league, and that's revenue that they end up sharing in the profit sharing with the owners. So they do get to share in this, right? And then secondly, they also share in the spoils that come up from the league becoming more popular because of gaming. And we know, that the league is more popular because of gaming. It's something like if you play fantasy football or you gamble, you watch a certain fraction more of the games relative to people who are just fans of teams, right? And don't gamble at all. So that's something to think about. We have a question here. Does Dan Bodine, does the equivalent of insider trading for stocks exist for sports betting? I mean, that's a good question. Like, I said this on my PFF Forecast podcast last year when I was allowed to gamble for PFF. Like, draft props were something where, the majority of the bets I placed were things I was hearing in the industry. It's a good question. Like, I think that it has to be explicitly laid out. Like us at Sumer right now, like we don't bet because we have access to information from the teams that could be an edge. And when I was at PFF, everything that we sold was to the teams, so we weren't getting that information back to us. And so it was, at least at that time, thought of as okay. I don't know if they would be evaluated now if they thought, because of all of the issues that could arise. I mean, I do think you err on the side of caution in that case. So good questions there. I do think that it is a very thorny issue right now in the NFL. I think that it's tough. And I don't think that there's a right answer, but I do think the right answer is, or part of the right answer, I don't know what the right answer is. A part of the right answer is not to have, as imbecile, in my opinion, of views as, the Clay Travises and the Mike Florios. Although, again, like, I think it's tough. It's a nuanced, it's a very nuanced area. And so you have to have thought about it for a second or two to really understand it. So that's really where I'm at here. We are going to move on because we are going to start previewing divisions a little bit on this show to the AFC South. The AFC South is a division we have in our season win totals projected for 31.8 wins, which is the lowest number of wins in the NFL per a division. So this is a division, and it makes sense, right? The AFC South, last year had two teams that earned picks in the top four, the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, and then there ended up being three of the first four picks were by AFC South teams, Houston taking two picks in the top three, as well as the Indianapolis Colts taking Anthony Richardson with the fourth pick. Sean says, get Richardson train rolling. I sort of agree here. Now we've done our own modeling work at Sumer. I'm going to give a little bit of insight into that here, but you're obviously going to have to go to the website and check it out once it's available there. But right now in this division, the Jacksonville Jaguars are minus 160 to win it all, to win the division. I'm sorry. The Tennessee Titans are plus 380. The Indianapolis Colts are 5-1, and the Houston Texans are 8-1. There are only four teams in the NFL right now who are favored against the field to win their own division. Kansas City being one of them, San Francisco being another one of them. And then you have Jacksonville, of course, and Philadelphia at minus 110 to win the NFC East. So technically, after you take out the juice, they would not be favored against the field, but they are a minus price right now on the market to win the NFC East. So this is crazy, right? Like you think about Jacksonville. Jacksonville's only won two division titles since 2000, right? So 1999. They were a part of a weird division where they won 14 games and the Tennessee Titans won 13 games. Jacksonville lost. They were 14-2. Their only two regular season losses were the Tennessee Titans, and then they lost to the Tennessee Titans later in the playoffs. And so they were, I think, 15-3 and lost all three games to Tennessee. Since that time, they went all the way until 2017 before winning a division. That was the Blake Bortles one where they almost went to the Super Bowl. And then they won last year, of course. They started out 2-6. But when they started out 2-6, they had a positive point differential. So it was one of those where they had good fundamental metrics, and everybody was kind of saying, okay, they have great net success. They were top dozen in the league in our metrics at Sumer and sort of adjusted passing and adjusted rushing efficiency on offense. Defensively, they weren't great, but they were, they were passable. They didn't actually get better defensively as the season progressed, but when they got to 3-7, they got to their bye, they were a plus 11 in point differential, and then they went on, to win 6 of their last 7 games, which was quite a feat. And then they of course had to get a touchdown by Josh Allen, the defensive end, to win that division against the Titans, who started the season 7-3 and then lost 7 straight games to end it after firing John Robinson, their GM. So they're a team where you look at it and it looks like a lot has come together, but there is, to me, too much in the way of fragility to really be able to buy into the Jags at the current market prices. I think that they should be favored. I think that they should be favored to make the playoffs. There's something like minus 200 to make the playoffs, including minus 160 to win their division. We would put them more like in that 55 range to make the playoffs, 45 range to win their own division. And I know that disagrees a little bit with what Mojal has. The over-under for the Jags too low. The over-under for the Jags is 9.5 right now, juiced to the over. We would make it more like 9 wins. And I think there's a few things. For one, we've already seen some of the fragility. Cam Robinson, their left tackle, who has recently, he's improved quite a bit since a slow start to his career. He's going to miss the first 4 games with a PED suspension. They lost Jawan Taylor to the Kansas City Chiefs in the offseason, their right tackle. They went ahead and replaced him with Anton Harrison. That could be an upgrade, but that's, offensive linemen take a long time to mature. They get Calvin Ridley, right? Calvin Ridley's in that guy who's at, almost a 2-yard per route run career, with the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, had that 2021 season was kind of weird where he kind of missed some time, then, had the mental health issues, and then, got caught gambling on NFL games and parlays. So he missed last season, comes over in a trade. The weapons that they have are going to be strong. You add him to Christian Kirk, a first 1,000-yard receiving season coming over from Arizona, a deal that many people thought wasn't great at over $20 million a year, but certainly worth it for them last year. Evan Ingram, sort of the classic tight end that is going to be better for the second team he plays for than the first team he plays for. He was good last year as well. Zay Jones, kind of approached, the 1,000 yards or so for him. So that you look at that group, and then you look at Travis Etienne at running back, didn't start the first 5 games, started the remaining games, averaged over 5 yards a carry. The success rate that they had running the football was not great, but he was able to, take on a big beating there, 299, total touches throughout the year, including the playoffs. And he was oftentimes, if you looked at some of the box scores for their games, he was oftentimes the only guy that carried the football for them. And so, I think that when you look at that offense, I think that they should be pretty solid. Trevor Lawrence is, his maturation is really the only thing that matters at the end, but there's a lot of things in place for him to do well. Offensive line's a question mark, of course, because of depth and because of these suspensions and because of, trying to get Harrison in there as a rookie. That's going to be the one that I think is going to be tough. When you look at on the other side of the coin, the Tennessee Titans, this is a team where, and we have some Jags felt like from Beat Gamer, Jags felt like they were lucky to get in the playoffs last year, an average team that had a few things that go their way, really a product of the division. I think that that's what a lot of people are saying. I think that a lot of people are baking into the cake now, though, that this was a team that jumped off last year because of a bad division, and now they're actually doing some things to get better. And it will be actually good. That remains to be seen. They do, however, have Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Foye Oluokun, as well as Devin Lloyd. Lloyd is a linebacker that I know a lot of football people really like. And then in the secondary, Tyson Campbell was pretty good last year after being the first pick in the second round a year earlier. I think that the secondary is one thing that concerns me. Devon Hamilton's a good pass rusher, kind of on the interior there. So they have some talent, and they have the most talent in the division, I think, by a mile. It's just the question becomes, are they able to sustain it? Somebody, Sean here, asked, how do you rate Peterson as a coach? Does having 2 rookie head coaches in the division factor in the -160? I think so in both ways. Like, I think Doug Peterson's really good. I think he maximizes talent. I do think he runs the ball too much on early downs. I think that, he makes up for it a little bit with being really woke on 4th downs and stuff like that. But, he's a good coach. I wouldn't put him in that kind of upper tier, but he certainly, him relative to the other coaches other than Vrabel in the division really does factor into that. And Cameron, as we talk about these other 3 teams, really does, hit the nail on the head here. Cameron Fletcher here. Jacksonville could potentially be scary with a QB on a rookie deal in an easy division to win. And it's not only that, they have a quarterback on a rookie deal with experience, whereas every other team in this division could be starting a rookie quarterback, period. And that could factor into it as well. I do want to pause for a second before I talk about the Titans, because we need to pay some bills here. Manscaped, 20% off with the promo code SUMER. Go ahead and get yourself, the Weed Whacker, the Lawnmower 4.0, basically anything that can help you kind of, keep it together this summer. I know it's hot. You don't want to be carrying around too much in the way of extra stuff this summer. So get yourself some Manscaped the copy here says your balls will thank you. I don't know if they can talk, but we certainly hope that that's the sentiment from your family jewels, as Manscaped is the tool for those family jewels. So we move on to Tennessee here. Tennessee's a weird one, right? You get Rand Carthon coming in, 49ers. They bring in Sarah Bailey, who's very good analyst from the Los Angeles Rams, to be their the director of analytics, which is cool. They had previously been one of the teams that had not employed that position before, so they are clearly wanting to be more progressive. Rand comes from San Francisco, which is the breeding ground for the executives and coaches around the league. When you think about Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, now Rand Carthon, obviously. And then you look at McDaniel in Miami, all over the place. D'Amico Ryans, who we'll talk about in a second as well. I'm blanking on the Jets coach Robert Salah. So like they're a place where there's they build up executives and coaches, and then they go other places, and they build up their analytics folks too, right? So Kwesi was, Demetrius Washington's boss, and now, Demetrius Washington's a VP at the Minnesota Vikings as well. And so, Rand kind of understands needing an analytics person in the building. So it's really cool to have Sarah go there, coming from the LA Rams, a place where she was a Super Bowl champion and 2-time Super Bowl participant. So there's good people in that building. And then obviously Vrabel has been somebody, a year removed from having the 1 seed in the AFC. It takes that team, gets them to 7-3. And you think about like that night that they played in Kansas City, they weren't even able to pass the football. They weren't even able to do much with Malik Willis, and they were still taking the Chiefs to overtime, really, flummoxing Kansas City's offense. And so and everybody was like, oh, they're a shoe-in to win the play, to win the division, make the playoffs, all that kind of stuff. And it kind of all fell apart. And some of that was quarterback. Some of that was quarterback with Ryan Tannehill getting hurt. Henry had a great season. He had over 1,250 yards after contact. And you're looking at the league has probably like less than 5 backs total who have that many yards in some, and he does it after contact, leading the NFL. He's still a horse. They didn't have much at wide receiver. They're going to have less they're going to have less on the offensive line without Luan, without Petit Freer for the first 6 games. Skoronski comes over from Northwestern to be their first round pick, but shorter arms type of thing. They were projecting him to be guard. Maybe he ends up having to play right tackle for them, at least initially. They get Andre Dillard from Eagles, and I love this signing. I think, you take linemen who have good pedigree, first round pick, and you bet on them to sort of grow in a new system. So there's things to like there. Traylon Burks hopefully can emerge in year 2. They don't have much more in the way of wide receiver there. That's why they were going after DeAndre Hopkins. So offense is a little bit lean, but it's not insurmountable for them, especially with Tannehill, who led the league in yards per pass attempt in 2019, has been a good quarterback in the league, especially in the play action game. Sitting, being the quarterback ahead of Will Levis. Will Levis, a surprise 2nd round pick after many thought he'd be at least a top 10 pick, and many said a top 5 pick. I look at that, I'm thinking, okay, this is a team that could possibly make a run at it. Their win total is 7.5. That's right around where we make it. I can't really advise if people are trying to make a wager on the Tennessee Titans. I don't really see any value there. I do like some of the additions that they've made. I do like them obviously keeping Jeffrey Simmons in the fold. Landry comes back. He had a pretty good year last year. Byers, obviously a great safety. Al Shire, the linebacker from the 49ers, is a very, very good player that I don't think anybody, kind of knows the name of. So the defense could be, at least passable, especially in the front 7. Secondary is going to be tough. Christian Fulton has not, done necessarily that well since being drafted, in the 2nd round a couple of years ago out of LSU. So, the team is not terrible, but it's not, I think 7.5 is probably a fair number for them on the market. Cameron Fletcher says they remind me a bit of the Tyler Thigpen era of the Chiefs. I hope that's not the case. But yeah, so at 7.5 for their win total, I can't really advise, sort of any sort of. Yeah, I think the market nails this here, which I think is unfortunate because, I think they're a team now they've drafted quarterbacks in rounds 2 and 3 the last few years. Maybe they don't really want to bottom out for a top quarterback to replace Tannehill, but they also probably won't, because they're gonna have competitive games this year in their division, and they probably, because Tannehill's good enough and because Derrick Henry is a guy that kind of increases the variance in games that they're underdogs in. Like, I think that they'll be around. So 7.5 feels right for them. I'm gonna look now at the Indianapolis Colts. They have a win total of 6.5. Like I said, 5-1 to win that division. To me, this is if you're going to make a long shot bet in the AFC. To me, this is one place where you can think about doing so. And there's a few reasons why I'm bullish on this team. I think, for one, they have some players that, I think underachieved last year when the whole thing came crumbling down, that should be better, this year. So like Michael Pittman Jr., Quentin Nelson, guys like that didn't, Braden Smith was pretty good last year. Ryan Kelly, I think like those guys, if there's a little bit more functionality to the team and they're not, if they're not in the process of firing and the coach and stuff, I think they'll be fine. And when you have that, Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, the guy who not only led the league in rushing in 2021, but led the league in total like RYOE, depending upon which model you use, there's a floor there that I think will be okay. Alec Pierce to me also is a guy that could very well surprise people. Isaiah McKenzie's been a good slot receiver in the league for a while. So I think the offense will be okay. And you add to that Shane Steichen, a guy like that, like Shane Steichen. So Steichen is in LA in 2020. He's calling plays for Justin Herbert to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's in Philadelphia for the last 2 years, looking over the Hurts ascension. Anthony Richardson at the very peak of the projection, to me, is a guy that can be that combination. He adds the athleticism, the toughness, the Jalen Hurts. It's sort of hard to quantify this, but like the leadership that Jalen Hurts has, and then you have the arm strength, the physique, the build, all that stuff of Justin Herbert. You put those two together at the very best, I think that's Anthony Richardson. Now, Richardson can completely bottom out and not have any sort of success there. And that's that's what you buy into when you buy into a fourth pick that has that kind of upside. I think Steichen, if anybody can get that upside out of Anthony Richardson, I think it's Steichen. So, if you're looking at something, 5-1, over 6.5 wins, like to me, if you're looking for a long shot in the AFC, I think the Colts are maybe a place to look. Defensively, they lose Gilmore. That hurts. You have another year of Buckner. He's getting a little bit older. They get Leonard back, who was injured for much of the year, but they lose Bobby Okereke, the linebacker, who I know. It'd be much cooler if his name was Bobby Okereke, but it's not. It's Okereke. I've been told that a number of times. Secondary is looking rough. Kenny Moore is a very good slot corner. I don't know if he can be the guy that plays on the outside. And then at pass rusher, they're going to need somebody out of Samson Ebukam and Kwity Paye and company to get some rush from the edge, because that's been a big problem for them for a couple years in a row. And so that those are just things to monitor there. But I think if a team is going to topple Jacksonville, who is the overwhelming favorite here, I think that Indianapolis is maybe at market prices a better bet than the Tennessee Titans. Okay, to conclude here, this division preview, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Houston Texans, because the Houston Texans for a few years now have been this team. In 2019, funny story, like when the Tennessee Titans beat the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round of the 2019 playoffs, I bought tickets to the AFC title game at Arrowhead, and of course the next day the Houston Texans are up 24-0 against Kansas City in the second quarter, and I'm feeling like an idiot. They of course lose that game. That was kind of the beginning of the end for not only Bill O'Brien in Houston, but also Deshaun Watson for a number of different reasons. 2021, they go with Davis Mills and Tyrod Taylor. And, last year they go with Davis Mills and Brandon Allen, I want to say, along with Jeff Driscoll or Kyle Allen. And it doesn't matter. And it's just been this team that's it's weird. Like, they haven't been embarrassing on the field. They've fired Culley and Lovie Smith in embarrassing fashion. But but they've really on the field have put together kind of a low variance, low ceiling type of team, right? Where you get guys like Desmond King in the fold. You get guys like, really the only guy on their team that could offer them any sort of upside was Brandon Cooks. Damian Pierce a little bit last year, had some upside, and they've tried to kind of build a roster with these like low stakes gambles around the edges and like no real good premium type players to get them over the top. And of course, this year with the second overall pick, now the second overall pick they have because they won a game that they shouldn't have won against Indianapolis in week 18. They swing for the fence at some premium positions here, right? They swing at the fence, of course, with CJ Stroud. Everybody thought for a long time Stroud was supposed to be the first pick. He wasn't. Then there was rumors that they didn't like Stroud and all this kind of stuff. Will Anderson was the favorite. Will Levis was the favorite for 2. All this stuff happened. And ultimately, it ended up being Stroud. But then, they went up to really get the guy they want. There's a question here from Sean is how good does Will Anderson have to be to justify the trade up? I mean, you're talking about a few $100 million in assets to trade up for that pick. I mean, he's got to be, I don't think he can actually, come up to the value of the trade. But, if you're Houston, you're thinking, okay, you've had 2 years of being, you've had 2 years of being this, like, not even mediocre, but just like not good, but also not good in a weird way. I was just sort of bad and boring. Whereas, like, for example, we just talked about the Colts a second ago. I think if the Colts are bad, it's going to be in an entertaining way. And I think if the Colts are good, it's going to be because they took swings that had the basement of being bad in an entertaining way, if that makes sense. The last 2 years, when you go with Tyrod Taylor, you go with Davis Mills, you go with kind of these players that, aren't really, going to win you football games, even at their best. It's sort of this, this really low variance team without a great mean. This, at least in Houston, gives them an opportunity. If you have the quarterback that hits, you have the defensive end, the edge player, that kind of player that hits, then you got a shot. Then you got a shot at a ceiling. Now, the markets aren't buying into it. 6.5 is the win total, 8-1 to win the division. We have those numbers right about right. So I think with Tennessee and with Houston, we're kind of, I think the market's fair on those two teams. Now, I do want to say, like, I kind of like some of the stuff that they're doing. They get Jerry Hughes in, Jerry Hughes played there last year. A player that I kind of really like as far as a complementary edge player. I think he can be okay. Jalen Petra, now that he's kind of in his right spot. They get Jimmy Ward, a player from the San Francisco 49ers defense that is pretty damn good. And then now at corner, you have Derek Stingley from last year. They didn't put him in great positions to succeed, but he's in a position that is of great value and he has great pedigree. He was somebody when I was at PFF and we were doing wins above replacement for college players. Stingley was one of the top 5 most valuable players in all of college football in 2019. So he's certainly got the ability. You add to that Steven Nelson, who's been a starting caliber corner in the league. Like, you look at this defense and everybody but Will Anderson is kind of good enough to get the defense to a certain level. And so if Will Anderson can come in and be that strong link player, they can be okay defensively, especially in a division where you have 3 rookie quarterbacks and a guy like Lawrence, who I think many people believe has the talent to make it, who still quite hasn't made it yet. I think this is the year where he either makes it or doesn't. That defense is the start of something. And then you look at the offense, I think that, Kenyon Green is a guy that, didn't do well as a rookie, but could be okay. Shaq Mason's another guy with pedigree. And then Howard and Tunzel are 2 good tackles. So again, in those weak link systems, you're doing okay. You get Dalton Schultz in, who I think Dalton Schultz was a huge product of the loss of Amari Cooper in Dallas, where, you just completely lost that sort of field stretching guy. And, funny, he comes over to Houston. Cooks goes to Dallas to sort of open up what would have been his territory in Dallas. He's an okay tight end. I think that's a player that they can build around. You have Nico Collins, John Mechie coming off of having of cancer, and then Robert Woods. Like, that's really the position where I think Stroud's really going to have to make his money, because I think I look at the rest of this roster and it's got a chance to be okay. And then they put 2 players in real strong link positions like Will Anderson, like CJ Stroud. And if those guys can succeed, I think that they have a chance. Only issue that I have is that wide receiving group is, to me, not good enough to elevate them. But, if CJ Stroud comes out and is an amazing player, all bets are off. Problem is CJ Stroud, we really only have data with him having 2 great tackles and a bunch of amazing wide receivers at Ohio State. So it's remains to be seen. I'm long-term okay on Houston. I think that there's some options there for them to be good. But right now I don't think I can buy them at current market prices if I were able to bet them. So that's, to me, I think, a good overlook of the division. You have Jacksonville, who's rightfully the favorite. I think that the markets are maybe making you pay a premium too much on them. Like Tennessee's, rightfully the second best team in that division, but the market's got them pretty pinned down. Same with Houston, probably fourth best team in that division. Market, I think, has them painted pretty well. Indianapolis is that team that has that fat tail. I think if Anthony Richardson can come in, provide the floor with the running, provide the ceiling with the otherworldly passing ability, their otherworldly athleticism, and he can emerge as a passer. Decent roster, coach that I think has maybe some buy potential there. That's maybe the team I think that has the most upside in that division against current market prices. So that's kind of my overview here. We'll have a written version of it, I think, after the holiday for the AFC South, and we'll do one per week. What I'll probably try to do is preview them, on this show, on the Friday show, every single week. So let's go ahead. Now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and go through some questions. So Oliver says, Eric, do you think Stroud has the surroundings of an all first start quarterback? Levis, Young, Love, Richardson. I think Stroud will start from opening day. Case Keenum appears to be his backup. Case Keenum's a good backup. Took my hometown Vikings to the NFC title game. I think you have to start him right away, and I think you really have to just kind of work with the ups and downs. He is a guy who, when I was doing the show with Thomas, I would say, look, I think he has the lowest ceiling, but he probably has the highest floor. I think he has the narrowest distribution, so that might help Houston, but it also is kind of indicative of also who's Houston's been the last 2 years, which is to me the issue. I don't think he'll be the best of the bunch. I think the best of the bunch, to Oliver's question, I know he made an amendment here. I think the best one will be either Young or Richardson. I think that Young, to me, has the highest median projection. I think Richardson has the highest 95th percentile projection. So and I think, when you look at Stroud, he probably has the highest 5th percentile projection, meaning like his floor is the highest. Like I don't see Stroud being a disaster in the NFL. I just don't know though if I just don't know that he's not going to be another Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins. That being said, Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins, if you paid them what Stroud's about to make, are incredibly valuable players in the NFL. So again, when you're on a rookie wage scale, the bar's lower, and that's good. So Colin says Howie Roseman loves to talk about risking being bad in order to be good. The Texans are risking being bad. Yeah, exactly. And I like that. I think the thing about the NFL, and there's an article on SumerSports.com that I wrote about transiency and the like, is like if you optimize for wanting to be a below average or a slightly above average team in the NFL, good luck, because those are so transient year to year that it's just not worth doing. Shoot for the moon, right? And be okay with being bad, right? You look at the NFL right now, and Chicago picked first or they were supposed to pick first. They were the worst team in the league last year, and their fans have never been more excited for the team over the past little bit that I've seen in forever. Like, it's okay. The water's warm, and we're not advocating tanking, right? I'm just saying, if you shoot for the moon and you end up being bad, that's okay, because being bad is the first step to being good, and having the draft picks and everything like that, to make your fan base excited. Where you don't want to be is kind of in that 8-9 win range every year. Or I think in Houston's case, that 4-5, 3-4-5 win team every year. And so good on them for taking the shot. I mean, if Will Anderson doesn't work, I think that there's going to be a reckoning there, but that's it's better than just kind of, if a team's average for 5 or 6 years, there's going to be a reckoning too. So, just some food for thought there. So to that point on Cooper, does a speed deep threat lift the floor of an offense by virtue of the space it can create? And so Sean says, this is my love language, MVS. Yeah, look, like that's one thing where I look at New York. We're going to talk about the NFC East at some points in the offseason. I like the Jalen Hyatt pick. I like the Brandon Cooks acquisition. I like, and this is one thing that we do have to measure better. I like that, I like these offenses having deep threats that will, take the top of the defense and open things up for tight ends and running backs and other wide receivers. And I think all too often we look at guys like John Ross and Corey Coleman and, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who, good on him, emerged, in the AFC title game and actually, made plays. But I thought Valdez-Scantling was valuable the whole season because of what he was doing. Every receiver on the Chiefs saw an increase in their efficiency because Valdez-Scantling was taking some of the coverage away. I think that's something you want to optimize for in the NFL. So that's a good question. Some good quarterbacks next year if you are bad. So a good gamble to take. Yes, absolutely. I'm really excited to watch Caleb Williams play this fall. I'm really excited to see Drake May play this fall. And I know my colleague and friend Parker Fleming's really excited to see Joe Milton play this fall. 100%. Like, and I think even if it doesn't work out, just again, the water's wet, continue to swim. There's all kinds of opportunity there. And Aaron also says, great move by Chicago. If Fields doesn't grow as a QB, they have the ammo to move up and get another shot at a franchise QB. And I do think in a Ryan Poles, as somebody I've interacted with a decent amount in my old job at PFF, like I think he gets it. I think he understands kind of, he could have taken Bryce Young, could have, traded Fields, but Fields is one of those assets where, most players are like this. After you've invested a few years into a player, he's probably worth more to you than he is to anybody else. Same thing was true about, a lot of other quarterbacks, even like Deebo Samuel. I think Deebo Samuel is worth more to the Niners than he was worth to any other team as far as, the way that they used him. And so I think that, holding on to the assets you have, and then, and being willing to go up the next year, that was like sort of the perfect outcome. I would have been okay if they would have stayed and taken Bryce Young and traded Fields. In fact, I probably advocated for it a few times. But, it's sort of thinking about it now and thinking about what they ended up getting, which was DJ Moore. I didn't think that I was advocating for them to go after Brian Burns. They got DJ Moore. That kind of changed my opinion on a possible trade there for the positive for them. So yeah, I think that that's to me is certainly a thing to think about. Oliver says, and this is true. Unfortunately, Houston has no first round pick next year to pick them. That is true. But they're not going to move off of Stroud. I think of more of like a guy like Fields, who they're trying to be bad or not trying to be bad. If they are bad, they'll have an opportunity to pick a new quarterback and they'll have the ammunition to do so. And this is also a good point by Sean. When you're not paying the quarterback, you can take much bigger swings on roster building. Like I think of that, like when the Chiefs were young with Mahomes and they paid Sammy Watkins $18 million a year or $16 million a year. There was no way that he was going to live up to that in most cases, but he added something to the Chiefs, and obviously he was big in the Super Bowl run in 2019. When your quarterback's making what Mahomes makes, every single big swing you have to take, mostly has to hit, right? And when he is making rookie money, you can make some mistakes because his surplus is so immense that you can draw from it, with some mistakes or from some mistakes. Here's the last question I'll take before I talk a little bit about this weekend's possibilities. Cade Massey spoke with Parker about incorporating the market into your betting model like 50-50. Should we be doing that with everything? This is a good point. Like we use market odds to sort of regress in fact, there's one power ranking we use that is totally fundamental based, and then there's one that's totally market based. So how does the market move off of, does it, so let's say the Patriots go from being a 7-point favorite to a 6-point favorite the next week, adjusting sort of how the market feels about a player or a team. Absolutely matters, and that should be done in all facets of life, whether that be fantasy, whether that be betting. You should always be thinking about where the market is, and you should be drawing from the wisdom of the crowds in many cases, because again, like when we talk about betting, when we talk about forecasting, we talk about football, selecting players, you're always going up against the market, and the market is an amalgamation of a bunch of different opinions, which the theory of the wisdom of the crowds would suggest is better than your one individual opinion. That's not always true. And if you have an edge, you're going to have, and that edge is good enough to beat the whole aggregation of the market, then you should lean on that. But you should take and respect the market quite a bit. Which leads me to my last thing I want to talk about, which is the USFL championship games this weekend. We got two interesting games this past weekend. Birmingham blew the doors off the New Orleans Breakers. The Pittsburgh Maulers won in overtime against the Michigan Panthers in a game where if you took the 3 points with Michigan, you deserve, I think, a refund because the game went in overtime and Pittsburgh won by two 2-point conversions in that shootout, ended up covering the spread. But be that as it may, this market's been interesting. Birmingham opened about minus 265 or so. It is now minus 350 depending upon where you look. So it's minus 350 on BetOnline. It's minus 290 at Pinnacle. It's minus 330 on FanDuel. So what's interesting, and I get this is the point I'm trying to make. In liquid markets like the NFL, you're really not going to get that kind of discrepancy in looking at different books. And in something like the USFL, that's a new league where the markets aren't as liquid, you are going to at many times get those discrepancies, which can often give you arbitrage opportunities, right? So there's one book, for example, I think it's BetOnline, that has Birmingham -8. There's another book that has a -7. All this stuff, and that's really where you want to look. Now, those don't exist in large quantities in the NFL, except in things like player props and stuff. But that's really where you want to look if you're trying to exploit these things. Because again, in big liquid markets, the wisdom of the crowds is pretty damn good. In smaller markets, that's where you can possibly exploit them. And so the point of that is just to say, okay, well, for one, the USFL, I can't wait for the game tomorrow. I really love that league. But it's also to say, in places like the NFL, find that market that is equivalent to the USFL. Find that thing that no one else cares about, whether that be draft props or whether that be player props, or one that's been big over the last few years has been division wins. So how many wins does a team get within their division? There have been markets up there on FanDuel and DraftKings, as well as Circus Sports for a while, and that is something to think about. If you're going to bet, again, as I like to say on here, remember the markets are liquid, the markets are good. We use them to reference where we think teams may be over undervalued, but we have a ton of respect for the wisdom of the crowds and what it's coming up with. So before I leave, thank you all for joining. Fridays are a lot of fun. I'm wiped out today. We taught a class at Wharton this week, did a normal job at Sumer, so I'm excited to go and enjoy this long weekend here. Happy Independence Day to everybody from the U.S. Happy weekend for everybody, including people who aren't from the U.S., of course. And we really appreciate you. Make sure that you tell somebody about this show. Wednesday, they'll be back with a new guest. So we got a question from Dan. How do you take out the juice in the market models? We will have an article about that on SumerSports.com. We love those questions, and we do want to be educational there as well. So, okay. Subscribe, rate, and review the show. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Go to SumerSports.com. Sign up for the newsletter that will be out over the next month or so. Until then, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week.